Hello and welcome, it's Jennifer. So today I'm going to do a video on something that I actually get a ton of requests for, and that's a shaker card. Now I really haven't done many shaker cards in the past, but I thought I'd give it a try since so many people are asking about them. I actually did a different spin on it. Today I actually turned a stamp image into a shaker card. So I took this great bubblegum machine from the recent Studio Calico Sandlot kit, and I'm going to turn it into a shaker card, and I'll give some tips along the way. I also want to show how I did the multicolor heat embossing on this image. Okay, so here is the stamp set from the Studio Calico Sandlot kit. This is the card kit, and I love this stamp set. I want to do that bubblegum machine in various colors of heat embossing, so this is how I do it. I am starting by just inking up the base of the bubblegum machine, so just part of the stamp with Versamark ink, and I'll stamp this onto some white cardstock. Now I wasn't real careful to mask off any of the ink when I was doing this, but I'll show you a trick to save some time. I'm going to go ahead and shake on some red embossing powder. This is from Ranger. It's a great red color. I'm doing this over a coffee filter so it makes cleanup easier, which you'll see in a few minutes. Okay, so I wanted to make the little dial here silver embossing powder. So instead of masking that off when I was inking, all I'm going to do is use a clean brush to brush away the embossing powder from this part of the image. And I'll later go back and emboss it with a different color. So after I've cleaned up the whole image with my brush, it's really easy to do. I'm just going to zap it with my heat gun, and there we have the base of the machine with the red heat embossing. Now I'm going to rub my anti-static powder tool over the surface just so I don't get any embossing powder where I don't want it. And I'm just going to ink up the top of the gumball machine because I want the top of the machine to also have some red on it. Now I'm going to stamp this again, and you saw that the ink is only on the top of the image, but I'm lining it up with the image that I've already heat embossed. So now I'm going to take some more red powder and just put it on the top. You can see I got some ink where I didn't intend to. I could have masked that off, but again, to save time, I'm just going to brush off the powder with a clean brush. And now I'll heat zap that, and we have our red embossing done. And then I can just use the coffee filter to kind of pour the powder back in and then throw it away. Those coffee filters are a great way to keep the mess of embossing powder under control. Okay, so now let's go ahead and do the dial of the gumball machine. I want this to be a platinum color, a silver color. So this time I am going to mask off all of the red area around it, so I just ink up the dial only. It just seemed to be faster this way, and I'm going to ink up only the top of the gumball machine where I want a little silver also. So the rest of the stamp is clean. I'm going to brush with my anti-static powder tool, line up the stamp, and stamp it right with what I already have. So now this put Versamark ink for the dial and the tippy top of the gumball machine also. I'm using the Ranger Liquid Platinum embossing powder for this. This is kind of a warm silver, not a super bright silver, and I'm going to tap it on. You'll see a little bit of embossing powder gets where I don't want it because maybe there was a little ink left on my stamp. That's okay. I'll just go ahead and brush it away before I heat set it, and then I'll heat set that, and there we have the two different colors of embossing powder. So there's one last area I need to do, the outside, the glass of the circle area where our little gumballs will be. So I again am going to mask off the area. What I'm using to mask here is some Scotch masking tape. It's kind of like a Post-it tape, but you could use pieces of scrap paper for that. Now I'm inking it up with Versamark ink just so I get that glass ball. I'm going to stamp that right down over the image we did before. This time I'm using just some sparkle embossing powder. So this is like a clear embossing powder with sparkle in it. I'm going to shake this on, and this will give us some fun sparkle around the edge of the gumball machine. Now it is time to make the shaker box portion of this card. So I'm going to cut away the inside of the glass ball where all the gumballs will be. I have a cutting pad underneath my surface here, and I'm using the Tim Holtz craft knife. I love this craft knife. Now for some people it might be easier to cut a hole in this and then cut along the inside with your scissors, or you could just skip the stamping of the glass ball and just do a die cut circle behind this piece, whatever works for you. But I just cut away the inside so it was open using a craft knife. So I basically turned the stamped image into a shaker image. You could just simplify this by doing, say, a die cut circle window to get the same kind of effect. There are lots of shaker cards out there, but I wanted to do my spin on it by doing the stamped image as a shaker. But before we turn this into a shaker, there was one last thing I wanted to do. I felt like you couldn't really see that embossing along the edge, so I'm tracing it over it with a light colored blue Copic marker. I did test it, and this embossing powder didn't seem to come off on the tip, so I thought that was okay. And now you can see that glass edge a little bit better. Okay, so now let's turn this into a shaker. I'm going to put some adhesive all around the window that I've cut here, and I've cut a piece of acetate. This is just some scrap acetate from packaging from an old stamp set I have. You could use pretty much anything here. Anything from packaging would be great to recycle here. And now we have like the glass over our little shaker here. Okay, so now we need to create the walls for the shaker. I just use my foam tape for this, and I cut it down the center so that I don't actually use as much. If you don't have foam tape like this, you could just use a series of foam dots. But the key is you want to put the foam tape up close to the edge of your shaker window, and you want to make sure each foam piece is up against the one before it. So you see how I push it right up against the edge of the last piece? Because we don't want pieces falling out this foam tape from our what's inside the shaker. So I'm putting pieces of tape all around this window up against each other. If you want to have more shaking going on in your card, you can actually double up this foam tape. So it's actually 2 foam tapes high, so it's double thickness, but I just went with 1 for this. It's totally up to you. You can kind of play around with what works for you. Okay, now that I have my tape behind there, I forgot I need to do a sentiment. So I'm taking a sentiment from that same stamp set. This says, "You're so sweet." I'm stamping it with black ink, my favorite Hero Arts black ink. Now I decided I wanted to heat emboss that so it stood out like all the other images. So I'm going to clear emboss on top of it and put clear powder on it. This is my favorite way to achieve a black heat emboss look. I know some people like to first ink a stamp with Versamark, then add some black ink to it and stamp it that way, but I never really get good results, nor do I get great results by using just Versamark ink with black embossing powder or black pigment ink with clear embossing powder. This is just this 2-step process gives me the best results, but you can try around and see what works best for you. So now I have a black heat emboss greeting that kind of goes with all the shine of the heat emboss gumball machine that we have here. Now there's one more thing I forgot to do before I put my shaker card together, so we're going to do that real quick here. I just trimmed a little bit from the sides and the top just to kind of center all the images in the center of my card, and it'll leave a nice little trim around the stamp piece so that the note card behind it can show through. Okay, so now let's go ahead and add the sequins into our shaker box. You could put anything in your little shaker box that you want to, beads or glitter or sequins. I like these sequins from Studio Calico because they come with big sequins, little sequins, and stars all together in one color. And they have every color that you can imagine. So I'm going to put like 3 or 4 in of all the colors in the rainbow in here. And I kind of lay them out to avoid them overlapping each other before we close it. So now let's go ahead, now that I've filled this with all the sequins I want to, I'm going to remove all the release paper here and then put a piece of white cardstock to kind of sandwich this. So all of our sequins will be closed in there. There won't be any holes for them to creep out of. Again, if you wanted more shaking with the sequins, you could have doubled up the foam tape, but I think this works out just fine, and I think those little sequins work kind of perfectly for little gumballs inside. Okay, so now we've finished off our card. We need to just have some dimension behind that stamped piece as we put this on the note card. Since there's dimension in the shaker box window, I put lots of foam tape around it and some adhesive behind the shaker box itself. And then I'll put this onto a black note card. I thought that black trim was kind of nice here. This is a Hero Arts black note card. I like it because it's white on the inside, so you have a place to write your message with any old pen that you would want to. So there we have a little shaker box. Now again, I turned a stamped image into a shaker image, into a shaker card, but you could easily do this with die cuts and create a little window in the same way and put anything you want to inside. Now if you're interested in the products I used in this video, I always link them to multiple sources below in my YouTube description, or you can head over to my blog at jennifermcguireinc.com where I have much more information. Also, if you enjoyed this video, please let YouTube know by giving it a thumbs up. That lets them know you want to see more from me. I appreciate so much you watching, and thanks so much for stopping by.